Glam Ham, thank you so much for hanging. Thanks for being up and at 'em. Appreciate you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on your show.
You know, it's crazy because I'll be honest, this whole conversation started because of the questions I want to ask you over the Gifford fire video. I saw it and I was like, God, I need to talk to this woman. But then I started like digging into you and learning your art, your radio work, your near-death experience. Like, there's so many layers to this woman. They're all fascinating. You are a talented bundle of stuff over there. What has been this path about? This is exciting.
It's a bit mad, I won't lie. It seems to have taken its own journey, and I've just had some very strange things happen to me in my life. Like there's a sort of trauma category where I've had some traumatic things and I have PTSD, and that has sort of shaped who I am and how I operate. Like I like being at home. Every time I go out of the house, there's a mini risk assessment I'm doing, so it suits me being at home. And then I had my near death experience in 2012, which was nothing dramatic like falling off a cliff. It was literally a blood pressure crash. And I had two people with me, which was really good, or else I never would have been able to tell people what happened because I don't think anyone would have believed me. But basically, I started to speak scientific information for about 45 minutes with no background and no interest in science, like nothing. I mean, I was so far on the artsy scale. You couldn't go any further. I was painting, I was performing, I was like writing songs and comedy. Everything was artsy and zero was science and zero electronics. And after the near death experience in 2012, I remembered, luckily, everything I had spoken about, like really stuff to do with physics, for example, and very profound stuff about the nature of reality and the nature of time. And it was so deeply profound. The world around me disappeared as well. And I saw an entirely different environment around me, which was this matrix-like grid of energy balls perfectly aligned in a lattice grid. No connecting lines. They were just all on the nodes of a lattice. And I was like, what did I even see? So I started to really deep dive. This was the beginning of my deep diving life, was 2012. And I went the science route because I never was really drawn to the woo-woo stuff. But then along the journey, I found there's actually some pretty significant overlaps with woo-woo and science, like with crystals and radios, crystal radios and stuff. And I started a podcast and interviewed a bunch of scientists like John Stewart Reed, who's this incredible sound scientist. He's absolutely incredible. He invented a cymoscope where you can make sound visible, which is sort of like a really souped up version of the Chladni plate where you sprinkle sound. You can strike a violin bow to it and the sand will take geometric shapes with the sound. So that's called cymatics, where you make sound visible. And John said, I think you saw the very fabric of space and time. And that was back in 2012. And here we are now.
Wow. And what did you attribute that long 45-minute, where you just changed? Was it something that just kind of took hold then and went away, but it changed you? Or do you feel like it changed and that's still there? Like, could you go on that rant right now kind of thing? Or is that still in you? What do you attribute all that to?
Well, that's a really good question. I know that when my blood pressure crashed, like I almost passed out, and I've passed out actually a lot in my life. I've had squirrely experience. I fainted a lot. I had a little car accident in 2018. I lost consciousness and didn't even know I'd had a car accident. And every time these strange things would happen, it changed me a little bit, to the point that there's been so many incidents. I started to think, this is part of my path, and it always would direct me to new information to do with frequencies. So I think when the NDE happened in 2012, it just took the ego away. It took all that fabric that's in our brain that meshes and governs our every decision, because it's this fabric of who we are and our personality. And when we speak, we're filtering through a personality always. And that seemed to go away. And somehow it was like I just was literally a transceiver, and information was just being dumped through me so fast. I felt like a hose pipe of information. And I was just speaking nonstop, no ums and ahs, no pauses. And it was covering everything, like that, how we are technically blind, we can hardly see. There's this electromagnetic spectrum, and visible light is the equivalent of a soap bubble. And that's in NASA's words, a soap bubble on the spectrum. And we technically can't hear because we hear such a small amount of what is actually around us. And afterwards, the research was going on for about 16 months intensely. And that's when I started the podcast to share the research. And then, of course, life gets a hold of you. And I was working and back in the UK and had a little company at Pinewood Studios and was doing loads of comedy, always comedy. And so it sort of drifted away, and then bam, have the car accident. And I had a concussion and post-concussive syndrome. And right, all of a sudden, I'm playing the piano, and it's just coming to me, playing the piano and understanding music and the intervals and frequencies in a way I hadn't understood before. And I started to prolifically write songs and music starting in 2018, like just tons and tons of songs and music, and just wound up back with frequencies again. And then when the pandemic happened, like everyone else, I'm under lockdown, and I'm doing like everyone else. You're trying to do your bit. And I'm like, well, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an EMT, but I can sew. So I was sewing nurses' bonnets and doctors' bonnets and masks for local hospitals. And while I was doing that, I did like enough for about 174 nurses and doctors. So I did quite a bit of it. And I was listening to this ham radio app called Hamsphere that was just like free to listen to. And I started to hear people talking from around the world on this app. Now, to clarify, when I say ham radio app, it's an emulator. So it's not real radio. It's emulating ham radio, but it's on your Wi-Fi. It's an app. But it's plucking into transmissions by real ham radio operators. And what I would hear was like somebody in Australia would be like, well, we're not allowed to go out of our driveway over here. My wife and I, we just go to the end of our driveway and say hello, and I better go now. She's doing the potatoes, and then somebody in India would be like, well, you take care, my friend, you take care. And I was like, wow, these strangers are awfully polite to each other. And that is ham radio. And so I was like, I think I want to become a ham radio operator. Let's see. Don't have to leave the house. Check. Can talk to people around the world. Check. Loads of juicy tech. Check. Yeah, this is a perfect hobby. Learn about frequencies. Check.
How
So
many
that's
people
how
are
I got
doing
into
this? I mean, look at the setup. First of all, before we get into like the specifics of ham, that's obviously your butte right there. That is a machine. Tell me about what's all around you right now.
Oh, well, I've got let me lift up my laptop. I've got loads of handheld radios. These are receivers. So you have receivers and then you have transceivers. So the receiver can receive frequencies from different distances depending on the band of frequencies that you work in. And when ham operators say like the 20-meter band, they're talking about a group of frequencies that the wavelength, when it makes its oscillations, one oscillation is approximately 20 meters, one wiggle of that wavelength. So that's where those numbers get thrown around. And most of like your local radios, like what firefighters have and everything, is like these dual bands, UHF, VHF kind of thing. And that's your real good emergency comms. So those are small handheld transceivers that receive and transmit. This big old buddy here is what's called an HF radio. This is by ICOM, which is a brand that I love. I just find the user interface is really elegant and very intuitive. But this is really actually, it's an old radio, the 7300, but it works with different frequencies than the handhelds. So this, you can talk thousands of miles away.
Wow.
I've spoken on very small watts even. I've spoken to Russia, Japan, Brazil, Cuba, Mexico,
And they speak
Canada.
English? How many languages do you speak? And they speak
Well, I
English?
only speak English, and luckily, when people transmit on ham radio around the world, I mean, I hear them, and if they're talking in another language, I'm not going to jump in. Like, for example, I hear a lot of Spanish people from Mexico, Spanish-speaking people, I mean, but they have to know the phonetic alphabet in English, and you'll find a lot of international ham operators will know how to make a basic contact so they can say their call sign in English. So it might be heavily accented, but they'll say like the Alpha Bravo and everything.
How many people are really doing this?
Well, not many women, I can tell you that. So, as usual, I'm a bit of a misfit there as well. But there's over 700,000 ham radio operators in the United States alone. And for sure, the majority are men, but there are women ham radio operators. They're just far less in demographics than the men are. But it is an awesome hobby. I mean, people say to me, "Oh gosh, have you learned so much?" And it's all from ham radio. I mean, literally, I knew nothing about ham radio and electronics. And you just kind of take your license. There is a license required. And for any listeners who are like, "I'm not getting a license, the air should be free," which I hear a lot. The reason is, you literally will have, like in your neck of the woods, the firefighters using radios. And if you step on their frequency, you're risking their life. So that's not funny. I take it very seriously and tell people it's not cool to think you don't need a license. That's like saying I'm going to drive my car on the sidewalk because the land is free. Well, you're going to hurt people on the sidewalk. And radio is just the same. You can interfere with aircraft, with people's pacemakers, garage doors, people's electronics and television, but most importantly, EMTs, ambulance drivers, medical equipment, like everything has a frequency, including everything in your body and every cell in your body. So the reason ham radio requires a license is you can use a lot of power, potentially, like enough that you could electrocute yourself or someone. So they really just want you to know you're going to be safe for yourself and for other people.
It's so interesting because then this hobby becomes, you're huge on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I mean, 100,000 plus people are checking out your videos and what you're doing. How did that bridge? How did that connect?
Well, it came pretty unexpectedly, to be honest with you. And I did have way more followers. And unfortunately, like just on TikTok, I had 300,000 followers. And I was banned in November
What?
10th, 2024, which was horrible. And I had produced 700 videos. And one of the things that I learned about, funnily enough, because I know you want to at some point mention the fires, but I would do videos on some correlations and dot connecting with, for example, fires or earthquakes or floods. I did a ton of research into Hurricane Helene, which really broke my heart, as it did many, many people. And then when you start to see the repeat of floods, and I would start to find the same little dots connecting where these floods were, but my account was banned. So I have to be really very careful now on TikTok. And that gave birth to comedy sketches, which help fly under the radar. So I have a character who literally wears a unicorn helmet, and she's the other version of me. And I write the sketches, and they're called Twinspiracy. So she's the one who gets to say what I used to be able to say. And,
That's brilliant. Brilliant. Wow. So I can't believe that just got ripped, that rug just got taken right out from underneath you.
Oh, it was horrible.
I know.
The worst was that they gave me no warning. I wasn't even able to download my 700 videos, and I had put so much work, because I mean, I had made hundreds of them during the pandemic when I was at home. Like every night I'd be making a couple of videos, and I'd made all these ham radio tutorials. I must have had like 100
Yeah.
tutorials, and poof. So now I've spread on multiple platforms so that I don't have all my eggs in one basket. But my
Mhm.
main platforms are TikTok and YouTube. So
This video that you saw or that you produced about the Gifford fire was really
yes,
interesting, and I love how you're like, there's this aspect of you where you're very humble in the way you say, "Hey, I'm willing to debunk myself here," but that you bring up a lot of coincidences. Talk about what you discovered in this video. This what looks like the Topaz Solar Farm, if I'm seeing it the right way, because that's where that big solar farm is out there, right
is
in
that
California.
called? Is that what the is it California South? Oh, there's a valley.
California Valley.
That's it, California Valley Solar Ranch. So it's
Okay.
CVSR. Is that
Yeah.
the one? Is that a
Let
different
me
one
see. I
that
think
you were
Topaz might
saying?
be different.
Okay.
There might be more than one out there actually, but Topaz is like just massively huge.
Okay. Well, first of all, disclaimer, disclaimer.
Yeah.
So whatever I talk about now, like literally is just speculations and
Totally.
observations.
Yeah.
And that Solar Valley, like that everybody's innocent. Nobody's doing anything
Right,
terribly
right, 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 right,
nefarious.
right.
But
Yeah.
what I noticed
Yeah.
was, first of all, the fire broke out on August the 1st. And I love looking at satellite images and clouds. It's one of the things with having PTSD, and I relate and just have so much respect for all of our first responders and all of the people like military and firefighters, many of whom have PTSD and have come into my lives when I was going live on TikTok. And we would really talk openly about how an invisible thing like PTSD can really confine your life and cause a lot of little hiccups in your life. And what I would find is when I'd look at the satellite images, it's incredibly relaxing, because especially, I mean, like even Google Earth, like zoom out of Google Earth, and it's just like this, there we are floating through space, and what happened is I started to notice odd things. Now, this I would get strikes on. On my last TikTok account, I'd get these strikes, and I thought, why am I getting strikes? These are pictures of clouds that I'm finding. But I would find these really squirrely, unnatural clouds. Like one of the shapes I kept finding was giant triangles that would be like 200 miles one size of the triangle, and it would just be missing from the cloud. So I'd put it on TikTok of, hey, look at this, and it just happens to be right by this, what is the bomb cyclone. This is interesting. And I was literally like, what's this? This looks interesting. And I'd get these huge strikes and threats of your account would be banned. And I was like, wait a minute, this is a satellite image. What's going on here? Like, this is I've happened upon something that clearly somebody doesn't want on social media. And I would have people write to me and like, hey, I work on a submarine, and those are like VLF submarine waves that have an effect on like cloud physics and stuff. And that's looking for missiles or looking for submarines. So I started to see, oh, the military, the military and the clouds have got something going on, And then with radio, I don't know if you've heard of HAARP. Have
That's
you
what I
heard
want
of
to ask you
HAARP?
about too.
Okay.
We're going to talk about that because
Yes.
this
Let
is
you
so
steer me,
interesting.
because
And
you
yeah, and
steer
so
me where you want.
yeah, no, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you bring up HARP because I'm glad that you're going there. It's basically a giant radio transmitter that points at the ionosphere, that
Yes.
charged layer above the Earth. It sends
Yes.
high frequency radio waves kind of upward, kind of like shining a flashlight into a layer of charged
Yeah,
particles. And there's like these two aspects
exactly.
of it. There's like waves that excite the particles, creating small localized changes that scientists can study using
Yes.
instruments on the ground in space. Yes, but then there's like this aspect where people wonder, can you use it to affect things and energy, and
Yes.
you know what I mean? So what is the facts and the fiction with regards to HARP?
Well, Really great explanation, by the way. I couldn't have done it any better myself. So HAARP gets blamed for way too much stuff. Like HAARP there is just a bunch of awesome scientists who are very clever people, and they're just trying to do cool stuff. But HAARP collaborates with other entities like the Department of Defense type of things, or the military. So there you've got your bunch of scientists doing things that other people want them to do. So, for example, during the Gifford fire, and I only know this because as a ham radio operator, there's this bizarre overlap with HAARP. They use HF frequencies, which are high frequencies. It's a certain band of the frequency spectrum. Well, that's what this radio is. When we talk long distance, we're using HF frequencies. So what HAARP does is when they have these like little programs where they're doing some experiments, they will make it publicly available to ham radio operators to tune in on the frequencies and make observations and give feedback. So I happen to know that on July the 23rd and 24th, HAARP was doing one of these experimental time periods. Now, on their paper, I'm kind of surprised they said this, if I'm honest with you, because everything I talk about, that's why I thought it really sucked I got banned, because everything I talk about is publicly available. It's not like I'm going, hey, I have a classified document in my hands. It's like, this is on the internet. So on the 23rd and 24th of July, 2025, they made this announcement of the times they were going to be firing up their transmitters. And they said it was in partnership with MITRE, M-I-T-R-E, MITRE. So I go and look up MITRE. And that company, these are all really cool companies. So again, I'm not dissing any companies. In fact, I love all these clever companies where they're experimenting and they've got the cool tech. But what they do is they're doing contracts with the government and with like NSA and DOD and the FAA. And one of the things they do is they test aviation resiliency. Well, then I happened to see, so that was publicly being done on the 23rd and 24th. Now, I'm going to hazard a guess that there are plenty of experiments done where they don't go, hey, we're firing it up today. Like, I think it's on the down low. Well, the very day before, this is where, they're just going, hang on a minute. San Luis Obispo Regional Airport was down and had to cancel its flights because the Santa Barbara radar tower was fully out. And they said it was because a fiber cable was cut, I believe to do with building a bridge. Now, as I dug for more research, what I learned is that these can completely be a real excuse, like it can be genuine, but also it can be cover. Like, hey, we're doing an experiment with electromagnetic frequencies. People in this area of the city are going to lose power. Let's tell them we cut a wire, but it really is other things going on. So it was, to me, incredibly unusual that HAARP had said, we're going to be doing this electromagnetic activity, which completely can interfere with radio and electronics. And we're doing it publicly the 23rd and 24th, and the day before the airport was out. And when you think about it, airports surely have some redundancy, right? Like one fiber optic cable can take out Santa Barbara's tower and a whole airport? Like, really? And I mean, if that is the case, then no wonder people might be testing the resiliency, because that's a scary thought, right? If you can go and snip a cable and bring down an airport. So I'm not saying any of this happened or was anything to do with HAARP. All I'm saying, like in the video, is, that's a coincidence. And then HAARP is in Gakona, Alaska. And they said they were going to be directing their experiment southeast of Gakona. Well, that lines up directly with San Luis Obispo Airport. Is it straight line down southeast? So these little connections started to formulate in my brain. And then when I was going through the satellite footage, as I just like to do, I like to noodle and scroll through and look for weird things because I find it fun. It's like really like playing a puzzle game like Sudoku or something, except it's looking for things in the cloud. So I really enjoy this so immensely. I can't even tell you, to find something juicy. And so there's a flash in the cloud, and it's right next to where the fire was. Now, when I say right next to, obviously on a satellite image, it's right next to it, but on the Earth was like, say, around 20 miles away, but still in pretty close proximity. Like on the satellite image, it's directly together. And it was a flash, and it was UTC time, Universal Time Coordinated, which is right now 7 hours ahead of Pacific time. So it was happening UTC at 11:40 p.m. every night, this flash. Now, I could only go back to the 29th of July in my satellite images, and then they weren't public anymore. But every single night from the 29th of July, this little flash would appear. Now, obviously, I'm like, that's got to be a reflection of the solar farm, right? So I go,
I mean, two out there. I've been checking.
Yes.
There's Topaz and the California Valley. Yeah.
There you go. So I find the coordinates of what I call my friendly light blob. And on certain days, it definitely did look like it was a longer beam, which I'll be honest, I haven't really seen before. But again, I'm totally saying probably a lens flare from the flash reflecting off of the solar panels. But the location, I was like, wow, that's funny. It's so close to this very big fire. And then I had noticed some other solar farms around. And I was like, whoa, they've got fires near them as well. And then I haven't even put this in the video because, again, I didn't want to get banned off TikTok again. But I'll tell you that it turns out there is a correlation with solar farms and fires. And it involves a number of aspects, for example, faulty installation to do with the electrical aspect of a solar farm and the inverters. And there's a lot of definite instances of this. And even in Australia, they shut down 5 solar farms because of a fire hazard. And this is very low on the public disclosure. Like, this is definitely let's sweep this under the mat because we want to keep cranking out the solar. But there is an issue. Well, logic, I'm not some physicist or anything. I just go with sort of, well, what makes sense to me. These fires that keep popping up by solar, I thought to myself, could the solar farm be heating the air just a little bit, that it becomes dry enough that that relative humidity goes down and makes the surrounding vegetation a little bit extra primed for fire and ignition? Well, it turns out the answer is yes. And it's very small. Like, between, I think, 1 and 2 degrees warmer. But if you're already in a drought with bone dry vegetation, and you just make it that little bit more bone dry, that's a significant thing. And so, kind of under the radar, no pun intended, they're starting to look into this and address this with talk of, for example, making sure the vegetation is adequately cleared around the solar places. And they've also found that when solar panels catch fire, it's very hard for the firefighters to put them out because the system, the infrastructure of the solar setup can continue generating electricity while it's on fire. So this is really dangerous and very, very difficult for the firefighters to have to deal with, similar to the lithium-ion batteries.
You hear that with
very
the batteries.
Difficult. Yes, very difficult.
They burn hotter, don't they?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, just terrible. So that's sort of a little thing I started to put together, and it ended up just being a whole bunch of coincidences of like, well, you've got HAARP. First of all, you've got the airport going down on the 22nd. and the radar tower. I mean, pretty scary. Like anytime an air traffic control tower or whatever, any of those guys
Sure.
get affected, it's very scary and dangerous. So, but the San Luis Obispo airport's out on the 22nd. HAARP's publicly doing their cool stuff on the 23rd and 24th with a company that gets hired by the FAA to test infrastructure to do with aviation. So
Yeah.
you can just go, for example, and again, I am speculating, if I was hired to test airport resiliency, what would you do? You'd mess with it. You'd go, right,
You have to.
let's try knocking these radio frequencies and see how much damage it does.
And let's
Because
do it to a small airport that maybe doesn't have a lot
yes,
going
exactly.
on.
Let's leave LAX alone.
Right. No, sure.
But let's try with San Luis Obispo. They're only
Yeah.
going to cancel 15 flights or whatever it was, not hundreds of flights. And I mean, I get it. So again, anything I'm saying, I'm not going, this is terrible, they need to stop. I mean, maybe possibly could be more transparent with customers. I don't know. But I get why they're doing it, because the aviation infrastructure when it comes to airports is incredibly old. Like radar stuff was put into airports when disco was just coming. That's how old
That's
it is,
crazy to think.
right?
Yeah.
You know, so they're in a little bit of predicament because along the way, somebody didn't keep up with technology, basically. So now it's quite behind and they have
Right.
to play catch up, and president's kind of on it and clearly is like, right, we're going to whip this into shape pretty quick. And so have you noticed how many glitchy stuff you're seeing in the aviation industry lately?
It's been crazy. The last probably couple years, you know, not even from both administrations. You're just seeing the FAA and like things are almost colliding and it's like, what's going on?
Well, we've gone through a horrible period of the things almost colliding, all of which was avoidable and extremely horrible. And then now there's these glitchy things, software things, like you had one of the airlines go down like a week or two ago, and it was because the software that governs the weight balancing in the aircraft. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Because when it's software, I'm not saying it is, but if you're hired to whip the United States' aviation infrastructure into shape, what is the first thing you have to do? Like if you go to a house and someone says, my plumbing's kind of knocking, you got to bang on some pipes and you got to knock open some drywall, right?
Yeah.
And you got to put your bubbly stuff on the pipes and check
Right.
where it's leaking. You've got to find the leaks. And how do you find the leaks? You have to run the water to find the leaks. So in order to find any little vulnerabilities in aviation infrastructure right now, they're having to do, my opinion, a ton of testing and prodding, a ton.
Wow. Yeah. Talk about the link between the coincidences between obviously the airport, the HAARP tests and research going on versus how it might have to do with the fire and those flares that you saw at that exact time.
Well, the flare that I saw, that let's just call it a reflection so people don't get like mad or anything. So what is most likely a reflection of that solar farm that was happening at the exact same time every single night? When I looked up the hours that HAARP was doing their test, was during those hours. It was the window that overlapped the 2340 UTC, which, 1140 UTC. Now, obviously, I saw the light beam on other days as well, but I would be shocked if HAARP publicizes every single thing they're doing. And here's the thing. This is why I think HAARP gets blamed for way too many stuff. Most people don't realize America's not the only one with a HAARP. So other countries have this and they call it something else. Like Russia has SURA, S-U-R-A, and then there's ISCAT, which is E-I-S-C-A-T. Other countries have this. I think Russia has had theirs from longer than the United States. I mean, we're going back to like the 80s. This isn't new technology. And a lot of people have no idea how advanced things have got right now. And that's why I do feel bad for all the people who are aware of it and get labeled as conspiracy theorists, because it's actually not. Like, it's scientific technology that is used pretty regularly.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting is because some people hear HAARP and immediately think of mind control or weather manipulation.
Right.
And I'm curious, from your perspective, where do you think, why do you think really these fears persist?
Well,
and how do you separate fact from fiction?
well, one of the reasons people are so suspicious is because there's enormous amounts of evidence, the degree to which we've been lied to. I mean, there's so much declassified stuff right now. I mean, I found one, and we're talking like, I don't know if it was 1956. It was so long ago. They found that Americans working, I don't want to say the city in case I get it wrong, but let's just say another country, and they found that the Russians were microwaving them, and they all were getting sick. Like, and they ended up, like, some of them passing away of cancer, and they had to move all these like diplomatic people out, but they were being microwaved like 60 odd years ago. So this is declassified stuff now, and you think, good Lord, like, why would they do this? I mean, there's been horrible experiments. I mean, I have found some stuff that I'm like, holy smoke, I can't believe. There's some stuff I found when I had my old TikTok channel that I could never talk about on the channel, to do with mind control. That is so terrifying. I was like, I just can't believe anybody ever declassified any of this stuff. This is like horrible.
Is it like MK Ultra stuff?
Well, that stuff for sure was a real thing. And you know what's quite funny? I found those documents out, and you know whose name is on the meeting when they had a discussion to do away with it, and basically say maybe we shouldn't be doing this to unsuspecting students and this sort of stuff?
Right.
Joe Biden.
Is that right?
Joe Biden is so old. He was there at the meeting. His name is on there, Joseph Biden, in this old little black and white document. Well, the other thing, though, is the human brain has these certain frequencies, and I don't know if you're aware. Have you heard of the Schumann resonance?
No.
So the Schumann resonance, you can get apps. In fact, let me see if I can just show you a picture on my phone of what one looks like.
This is so fascinating.
It looks really similar to my radio here. So all the Schumann resonances is there are radios around the world, in particular, Tomsk, Russia, and Cumiana, Italy. And what they are listening for on a radio that looks just like this is certain frequencies from like 0 to 40 hertz. And what that is the frequency that's between Earth's surface and the ionosphere. Now, people call it Earth's heartbeat, but that is a little bit misleading, because it's not the Earth that's beating. It's this cavity between Earth and the ionosphere, and where it comes from is lightning. So it's a charge of electricity from lightning, and the frequency on average is 7.83 hertz. And a weird and interesting math is the exact dimensions of this wave and the Earth mean that it's a standing wave. And a standing wave does this. It just goes up and down like this, rather than like a wave you'd see in the ocean that's wobbling along like this. You know, it's just bump, 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 like that. And these frequencies overlap the human brain. So like the 7.83 is, I think, a more relaxed state that the human brain would be in. So there are for sure documented experiments with frequencies affecting the human brain. So here's today's reading of the Schumann resonance, and I can tell you this is extremely abnormal. And the reason it's abnormal is because, let's say that was a solar flare, you would see it gently sort of boom and fade out. But this is almost cut with a surgical knife at the side. So then we get into human-induced changes, and that's where it could be these, they call it ionospheric heaters. And I don't even want to blame HAARP because other countries have got them. So it's not like, oh, it's HAARP, it's HAARP. Also, this can be geomagnetic storms. So to be clear, you would expect to see something with geomagnetic storms. But when they have sharp cutoff lines like this, it just, you can tell by looking at it. I mean, I found one and it's like on at 0 hours and off at 0 hours. Like, that's not a solar flare that's clocking in and
Right.
clocking out. Something is being turned on and being turned off, you know. So it can be radar jamming, it can be submarine related. Like, they have to bounce those frequencies to talk to submarines thousands of miles away, you know.
This whole idea with radio and frequencies and the way that you study it, it's almost, it goes beyond just like science in a way, right? It's almost like it's beyond the levels. It's kind of deeper. It's almost like
Yeah.
spiritual. What would you call it?
Yes,
What would you
exactly.
call it? Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. It overlaps with spiritual 100%. And do I have them close by? If you gave me 1 second, I could grab something, but I know
Yeah.
you're recording. But for example, I have tuning forks. And when I had my NDE in 2012, some of the information that came to me, and I knew it as truth, like it resonated through me like the biggest truth of my life. I felt I was seeing through the keyhole of the universe and being given a glimpse. And some of the messages that came through were, well, the first line I spoke was, everything is an illusion. It is all our perception of an infinite range of frequencies and vibrations. To me, for that to come out of my mouth when I was Miss Painter and stand-up comedy, was
Right.
like, I wouldn't have even understood what I was saying, but I knew I had to find out. And then I found out that that statement is true. If you know, the biggest physicists of the day will tell you, like, there actually isn't solid matter. And it's a big head shaker, you know, and if you condense the actual matter that was Earth, you'd end up with like a pea, you know, this heavy pea.
Right.
But the other message was, sound can heal everything and music is the key. And so I dove into sound healing, and I was in the UK and I was studying sound healing in Glastonbury, and I studied the frequencies of color in Cambridge. Masses of crazy coincidences happened. I was struck psychic for 5 months, like incredibly psychic. It went away when I went back to the UK and got to Heathrow. And I used to say in my stand-up, it was like I got to Heathrow and customs found me in possession of a small amount of hope. And it was like gone, you know. But the sound healing is astonishing what it can do. And do you play any musical instruments at all?
I've always liked playing the drums, but I'm not like really
Okay.
good at it, and I don't really
Oh, that's
play any music.
I have drums too.
Yeah, I do love them.
So the easiest way to explain is like on a piano, or if you've ever sung like the do, re, mi, fa,
Yeah.
so. Well, between those notes are what's called intervals. So you have like do, re, that's your second interval because you've going to your second note. Well, there's a
Right.
special magic that happens between the first note and the fifth note. So do, re, mi, fa, so, do, so. If you did those at the same time, which I do with my tuning forks, you get what's called the perfect fifth. And a scientist named John Beaulieu studied this and found that if you play the perfect fifth, he would take people's blood and find that their nitric oxide would go up based upon the sound frequency. And that would help like clean the arteries and clean up your blood. And that is literally the tip of the iceberg with sound healing. It's an absolutely fascinating thing. But these are all the things that back in 2012 I dove into. So I interviewed sound scientist John Stewart Reed 3 times, and I interviewed another acoustic scientist, Pierre Rubassa, who was in Switzerland, and he had invented a machine that was their equivalent of the FDA approved for healing illness. And it was a sound generating machine. And he was able to tune in frequencies for different ailments.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Can you let me do 2 more questions? I know we've
Yeah.
gone so long, but I've had so much fun talking to
yeah.
you, and it's just been awesome. The final one on, just to kind of wrap up the whole video and the reason why I reached out. Let's say, you're at a town hall, emergency management, FAA, they're all there, the people with the fire. You got a mic, one shot. What would be the first question you would ask? Not one that just one that invites truth, not necessarily defense.
I truthfully don't know if it'd be a question. I think I might want to say, get your pencil. I'm going to tell you some stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So I had a
love
bunch
you.
of people write to me after
Right.
your Gifford fire, and they said that it was very common that these fires are starting with chains and sparks. Now, my first thing is they make straps that don't cause sparks. Like, hello, governor, make a regulation in California where you have to have these non-sparking straps. I mean, people were literally writing, going, we've been told it's chains for as long as we can remember with these fires. And it was like, and no one's done anything about that. But you can get alternate things to strap to your trailers and stuff. I mean, and let the government buy them. Like, don't make people buy them. Look at the money that is wasted when these fires break out. Imagine the money you're going to save if you don't go and burn 130,000 acres. What's burning right now in the Gifford fire? 130,000 acres is burning. Your air quality up there is horrific. I put it behind me on my screen to show you. Let me just bring it up. Hold on. This is your air quality. Do you see that there?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's like lock yourself indoors and shut the windows and fire up the air thing. So I would say that. And then I would say, why aren't you planting more things that don't catch on fire? Like just start to change out the vegetation. I mean, along the roadsides, don't have flammable grasses. Start to put succulents in. And I know these sound simple, like, oh, like we can just do thousands of miles of highway, but like start. And then in 5 years, they'll have taken root and you might not be sparking with a guy who has a flat tire, which is what I believe the current theory is, and clear the forests of the debris.
Well, yeah, that's been a huge issue, especially in California.
Yes.
Now, Glam, your content is technical, it's spiritual, it's theatrical, but it's always human. But behind it all, it's just you, which is really exciting. And I've loved getting to know you through this. But when you turn everything off, the radios, the screens, all the voices, what's the frequency that you're still tuned into and listening to?
I love that question. I think it's excitement. If you can find the things in your life that make you feel a bit like a kid and be excited, whether that is literally like that you go and plant some seeds in your garden, or you're sewing or making something, or you're building something, or you're fixing your car because you're going to make it sound more smooth, whatever gives you that lift in your heart, that is your compass in life. And when I had my NDE, I kept getting these downloads every night between 3 and 4 a.m. that were a little bit annoying because I'd wake up and I'd have to write them down. They wouldn't go away unless I wrote them down. So it was like I was just the receiver, writing the notes. But one of them, I just said one day, if you're going to give me an answer, what is it all for? What are we supposed to be doing here? Like, how are we supposed to be living our life? And the answer was extremely clear. It was that far less attention is given to the heart than the brain, yet it is the heart that should be guiding our life. Your heart is your true compass. So the more you are aware of your heart's up and downs, your excitements or your disappointment, like what makes you go, oh God, I have to do that again, that might be a sign you need some change in your life. What do you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm getting to do this? that's a direction you want to try and open up in your life, you know. And if you ever have, I know I'm adding on a bit here, but there's something I always said to people, and I know they appreciated it. So your listeners might appreciate when you have those confusions and what should I be doing? I always say, give it the pillow test, because when you lie down to go to bed at night, you put your head on the pillow, your personality subsides. You're only answering to you. There's no personality. There's just you and how you feel. And imagine the two things you're trying to decide, like, should I move to Vegas or should I move to this place? And just listen to your body and your heart for that up or the down. And that's the pillow test. And the more you tune into that, it will guide you in your life. And I frankly don't know why we're not taught this in school, because that was given to me, and I've realized that there's so much truth to that, the heart intelligence, you know.
Yeah. I sometimes call it like your EQ, right? Your emotional
Yeah.
intelligence. I kind of look at it like that too. You have been so much fun to meet, and
Mm.
I feel like I made a new friend here, certainly a
Oh,
dedicated follower. And maybe sometime we could chat again. I think it'd be really fun.
yeah. Oh, I'd love that, Adam. Thank you so much. I've had a blast, and you've been great, and I can tell you did your research, telling me about the ionosphere is very impressive. Not many
I didn't
people
want to
can do
like,
that.
I didn't want to come here because that's as I'm getting to learn you. I'm like, oh damn, she has really got her stuff dialed in. I'm gonna have to read up a little bit more, make sure I got this all down. But no, it's been so much fun. I can't wait to chat with you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, and you take care.